Hi, fourth graders. Welcome to our second week of Read Aloud videos. This week we're going to be reading Liberty, How the Revolutionary War Began. We are going to be reading about 2 chapters a day for this week and next week. So make sure you're following along so that you can talk to your teacher and answer some of my questions. Last week we read about how the Revolutionary War began, and this is just going to be another way for us to learn more about the Revolutionary War and why it happened. Before we dive in, if you want, you can take a pause at this map showing a couple of the main cities in the Revolutionary War. Feel free to pause the video whenever you'd like to take a closer look at pictures or words. Here's our table of contents that we'll be following along. We're going to start with Chapter 1, the Liberty Tree. The Liberty Tree. Long live the King! That was the favorite toast of Englishmen in the 17th and 18th centuries. Even the ones who had left England and sailed across the Atlantic Ocean to live in America. Why had they left home? Some left in search of religious freedom. The king and most Englishmen belonged to the Church of England. People who tried to worship differently were thrown in prison or even hanged. Others left because they were poor and hungry. They hoped to find jobs and food in America. And some hoped to grow rich. In England, a poor farmer couldn't become a respected landowner. If your parents were poor, you too would probably be poor all of your life. But in America, if you worked hard, you might become one of the richest people in the land. After reading these things, I want you to pause the video and jot down, why did people leave England to come to America? Great, when you're finished, unpause the video and we'll pick up over here at the caption. Who were the Americans? Most of them were farmers. Others were shopkeepers and tradesmen. Many were black slaves who lived mostly in the South. Some of the English colonists were really Dutch, Swedish, or German, but they lived as subjects of the England king. This word subjects means that they live under the English king's rule, so they have to follow what he says. It wasn't easy, but it was possible. America was the land of liberty. Liberty is just another word for freedom. By the mid-1700s, a huge elm tree in Boston had become the symbol of the new land. It was called the Liberty Tree. The townspeople gathered under its branches for important meetings. Other towns and villages along the Atlantic coast named trees in honor of the Liberty Tree of Boston. If they didn't have a big enough tree, they put up a tall pole and called it the Liberty Pole. The colonists were still proud to be subjects of the King of England, even though he ruled from 3,000 miles across the ocean. But they were very glad to live in the new and wonderful land of opportunity, America. So even though the people left England for lots of different reasons, they still respected their king and followed their rules. In 1760, a new king, George III, came to the throne of England. George liked simple food, boiled mutton and turnips, and enjoyed working in his gardens. Some people called him Farmer George. Others called him the Royal Button Maker because he loved mechanical inventions. We're going to read one more today. Chapter 2, Help. Gee up! On horseback, on foot, and in wagons pulled by oxen, English colonists set out to find new homes. It was exciting to be a pioneer farmer, but settlers who made their homes on the frontier were always afraid of Indian attacks. The first English settlers, the Pilgrims, had made peace with the Indians, but some of the settlers who came later treated the Indians rudely and damaged their land. How do you think the Indians feel with all of these new people coming to their land? They cut down trees, fenced in fields, and killed or frightened away wild birds and animals. Finally, the Indians struck back. They joined the French in the War of Terror against English settlers. Flaming arrows flew through the dark night. Many lonely farmhouses and sometimes even whole towns burned to the ground. Men, women, and children were killed or made the slaves of Indian tribes. The English settlers needed help. They had a powerful ally, England. They called England the mother country. The American colonies were England's children. Now that her children were in danger, the mother country sent soldiers to help the settlers' own troops defend the colonists against their enemies. So right now, for all of the colonists that came over from England, they're now fighting against the Native Americans. This is before the American Revolutionary War, when the colonists still wanted to live under the king's rule. So they got help from the king and from other British soldiers to come over and help fight against the Native Americans. The fight, called the French and Indian War, began in 1754 and continued for almost 10 years. At last, the French and their Indian allies were defeated. That means that the British and American colonists won. In 1763, a peace treaty, the Treaty of Paris, was signed. France lost almost all their possessions in North America. Britain got Canada and most of the French lands French lands east of the Mississippi. The colonial soldiers hung up their muskets, that was a type of rifle or gun, over their fireplaces and went back to their farms. They hoped they would never have to fight again. As the war grew fiercer, English colonists began offering bounties for Indian scalps. Bounty hunters sometimes showed off by wearing wigs made of scalps. That's really gruesome. By the year 1733, there were 13 English colonies strung out along the Atlantic coast of North America. Beyond them loomed the thick, dark forest. George Washington, who later became the first president of the United States, fought in the French and Indian War. "I heard the bullets whistle," he wrote to his brother, "and believe me, there is something charming in the sound." After reading today's 2 chapters, the questions that I want you thinking about are, first, why did people decide to leave Great Britain and England to come to America? And 2, how do you think the Native Americans or Indians are feeling with these new colonists coming into their land? See you tomorrow for our next chapters. Bye.